Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we're checking out this monogreen Surrak stompy deck, which has been sitting in my drafts for almost a month now, and this is really a green deck pretending to be a red deck as it's full of haste creatures, including the new Frenzied Baloth from Edge of Eternities, a 2-mana 3/2 with trample and haste. It cannot be countered, and once in play says creature spells we control also cannot be countered, so shines against control decks, and also says combat damage cannot be prevented. So that last line of text may be more relevant in formats where the One Ring is legal, but every now and then you might run into a protection effect that this can also shut down. So the Baloth is great, and we're complementing it with a bunch of other hasty and tramply creatures. At 3 mana, we've got the namesake Surrak Elusive Hunter, a 4/3, also cannot be countered, has trample, and whenever a creature we control or a creature spell we control becomes a target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, we also get to draw a card, so this can maybe punish opposing removal spells. And then we also have 2 copies of Surrak the Huntcaller, which was reprinted in Foundations, originally from Dragons of Tarkir, I believe. A 4-mana 5/4 with Formidable, which always implies something will happen if creatures we control have total power 8 or greater. In this case, at the beginning of combat, target creature gains haste until end of turn. So Surrak will often give himself haste when he enters a battlefield, and then on subsequent turns can maybe give other creatures haste that just entered the battlefield, so we can keep up the pressure. So the 2 Surraks of course play very well with each other. We've got a lot of other 3 and 4 powered creatures to easily enable Formidable with just 2 creatures on the battlefield. And then we also have 2 copies of the Axebane Ferox as another haste creature. Also has a Death Touch and Ward, making the opponent collect evidence 4. So if they have an empty graveyard, they cannot target the Axebane Ferox. And we can also keep the graveyards clean with a Keen-Eyed Curator, so the opponent may struggle to collect evidence. And the Curator is also great against any other graveyard strategies. Thinking of the VV Cauldron combo decks, we can also maybe mess up their graveyards. And then a 2-mana 3/3 is still a fine rate. And if we reach a total of 4 or more card types exiled with a Curator, it also turns into a 7/7 Trampler, so that's another very nice payoff. And then rounding out the deck, since I'm playing only forests in the mana base as opposed to including some creature lands, the Flourishing Bloomkin also makes a lot of sense as it grows with each forest we control. It can also maybe be disguised in longer games, and then if we flip it face up it can find additional forests. And then we also have a bit of ramp, of course, with Eleanor Elves speeding things up, as well as the Herd Heirloom, which is a way of making mana to cast our creature spells, and it can also maybe give our 4-powered creatures trample, and if they hit the opponent we get to draw a card, so that's another very nice source of card advantage. And then our removal comes in the form of fight effects. Bushwhack is quite flexible as it can also be used to find a forest, so despite only having 20 forests we can still get by thanks to Bushwhack as well as our other mana producing cards. And then of course Bushwhack can also be used to fight, which is great when we have these large creatures. And Primal Might can do the same, can always cast it for X = 0 just to fight, but if we have spare mana we can also pump up our creatures so they can maybe survive the fight or deal additional damage, and we can also use this as purely a pump spell without needing to fight, so it's not dead against control. And then we also have the full playset of Scrap Shooter, which gives us an answer to opposing artifacts and enchantments, which can also be key, and it also has reach, so it can also get in the way of maybe a Slick Shot, which could otherwise threaten a lot of damage in the air. So between our artifact and enchantment removal, creature removal, and then answers to cards in graveyard, we do have a lot of angles covered. Can also punish counter spells and removal, so despite being a very aggressive, low-curve deck, we still have a lot of built-in utility. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. The elves can already set up a turn 2 Scrap Shooter. And against the red, this hand should be pretty effective. Alright, maybe not quite what I had imagined. Scalding Viper. So, could double spell Heirloom into maybe a Baloth. Could just cast a Scrap Shooter and have a 4/4 on defense. This will start dealing some damage. Yeah, I guess going for a Scrap Shooter here is fine. Want to wait on Bloomkin until it's a little bit larger. And if Scrap Shooter soaks up a burn spell and an attack, that's fine by me. Alright, the Hellkite's pretty good here, taking out the elf. This has reach, but not quite large enough. The land is good, so we could double spell Heirloom into Baloth. Could also Primal Might, take out the Viper, and then play Baloth afterwards, which I kind of like. So we don't keep taking damage. And I'm probably not going to want to fight a Screaming Nemesis if they play it. Maybe a Hellkite at 5, but that's still pretty far away. For now we can try and turn the corner. And then one more forest, and I'm happy to play the Bloomkin. The Baloth is a little easier to remove at 2 toughness. Alright, they've got a Needlehead, punishing card draw. And a Burst Lightning takes out the Baloth. Okay, so we've got options. I think I'm just going to attack and then go Heirloom plus Curator. I don't get really punished for double spelling. Curator has instant, creature, and sorcery at the moment. So still missing one type to maybe grow into a 7/7 Trampler. Although we cannot use Heirloom, I believe, since it's only to cast creature spells, not to activate abilities. Opponent did have another Viper. Needlehead could maybe still attack if they have a burn spell. Then they would just finish off the Curator. So then I think it makes more sense to take the hit. I'll take 2. Never mind, opponent had a Witchstalker Frenzy, so they were maybe debating which creature to remove, but of course if they don't take out the Curator, we can block the Needlehead for free. So we draw, another Heirloom's a little awkward here with the Needlehead. But I think I still like going Heirloom into Scrap Shooter number 2, get to smack for 4. And then I don't really have an intention to draw with Heirloom. But I will be taking 2 more from the Viper. So we're at 8. Opponent can attack for 4 in the air. We'll take 1 more from Needlehead. So, yeah, could be close. Opponent could also decide to keep the Hellkite on defense. Then we just slowly die to the Needlehead until we maybe top deck another Primal Might. Got some other good top decks. So we'll see if they attack. Right, just a Hellkite. So if I take 4 at 4, opponent only has 3 toughness on defense, so that should leave them dead on board. Trample for 3, trample for 2. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. Our hands maybe a little unexciting, missing some interaction or some ramp. But we are on the play. Got some 3/3s and 3/2s with haste. And a third land goes a long way. Opponent is blue-black. So Baloth making stuff uncounterable matters. Can attack past the Siren. And then, yeah, ideally draw lands, maybe going Heirloom into one of my 2-drops. So the blue-black mid-range deck, we can expect Kaito to be ninjutsu'd at some point. They might have Enduring Curiosity, which is also an enchantment that the Scrap Shooter can blow up. Still a small chance that they're on an Esper Pixie deck instead. Siren attacked for 1, so they're probably not gonna be exploring here. They might have a Drowner for 2 mana to tap down the Baloth. gonna be another Siren. So they didn't seem interested in double blocking. And now they go exploring, finding a land, so no great blocks available. I did find a forest. Playing Scrap Shooter is also good because it gives us a reach creature to maybe get in the way. Although if I go Heirloom plus Curator or Bloomkin, we do maybe give ourselves the option of casting multiple spells on the following turn. So that still seems reasonable. So get in for 3. Also don't think Scrap Shooter really wants to destroy the map. And then, yeah, it's a close call between Bloomkin and Curator, both 3/3s at the moment. But maybe with a forest, Bloomkin can grow into a 4/4 and then Heirloom is more relevant. Don't really see myself disguising it this game, since we have a bunch of other spells we can cast, Heirloom to draw more cards, find more action. So 3 mana, could see an attack and a Kaito being ninjutsu'd into play, but opponent's gonna hit the brakes with a Preacher instead. Yeah, that is a pretty good blocker with what we currently have in play. So playing this face down now becomes a little bit more appealing, since the game has stalled out a bit. Could still Scrap Shooter, blow up your map, or just play a 4/4 reach and call it a day. Yeah, the problem is Heirloom does not pay for the flipping face up of Bloomkin, so then we're still multiple lands away. So I think I just play Scrap Shooter and pass. It's a bit of an uneventful turn, sadly. 2/4 Death Touch lines up quite well. And even if we do find a fight spell, we'll still lose a creature in the fight. So yeah, Death Touch can be quite the roadblock for the monogreen aggro deck. Alright, opponent's going to Bitter Triumph the Baloth, so that kind of implies that they have some counter spells they want to use. Take my turn, find another Heirloom. Okay, so can start by casting the Heirloom, see what's up. Maybe Scrap Shooter attacks, although if they block with Preacher it's still just a trade. But then I could just play another Scrap Shooter, assuming they don't counter, of course. And start with the attack. I'm fine with a trade for Preacher. Allows our other creatures to get in. So I'll accept. And then assuming they do have a counter spell, I guess I start with Heirloom, and then I can still Curator afterwards. Don't think I go for Scrap Shooter just yet. And Bloomkin I would also rather disguise at this point, I think. And then should have actually tapped both Heirlooms instead of my land. But yeah, opponent did have the Phantom Interference, so we successfully baited it out. So that was kind of the goal. Alright, so now an extra land grows Bloomkin, so Heirloom becomes more attractive. Got another Bloomkin to add on to the pressure. And Drowner's also a decent tempo play in this type of matchup. But they probably have more counter spells in hand if they were willing to answer the Baloth the way they did. So another interference counter unless you pay 2. If I get a forest, I can still resolve my Scrap Shooter. And now Bloomkin is active, so I can go for an attack first. Because if I want to play Scrap Shooter and have the mana left for interference, I would have to pay using Heirloom, so then I don't have it available anymore. So playing it main phase doesn't really make a difference. Alright, opponent did have the Curiosity. So we'll see how they block. Alright, so I can still trample, draw 2 cards, and then Scrap Shooter finish off the enchantment Curiosity. So glad they didn't double block. So I'll gift a card, so they don't draw too many more cards going forward. Although a reach creature, of course, can also block the Sirens, but knowing about Drowner, they can just tap it down. So then they would have drawn at least 2 cards. And now we've got some more Bloomkins coming up. Can see if we can maybe disguise them, so they all become larger. Curator also a way to maybe exile a Curiosity while it's temporarily in the graveyard before it returns. So that's another interaction to keep in mind. But yeah, now Curator can also grow quite quickly between enchantment, creature, instant, their sorcery. So we can make it a 7/7 trample. Opponent passes with Drowner available. So could start by casting the Curator, so that if they do flash in another Curiosity, I can make the play I described. And then I can still maybe disguise a Bloomkin at least. So we'll go to attackers. And there's a Drowner. Scrap Shooter's tapped down. And then now I have to decide. I think I just disguise a Bloomkin first. Now if they do have another Enduring Curiosity, they would have a fine attack on the ground. But yeah, I think I still try this. Can pay for Phantom Interference. And then now the question is, do I cast another Bloomkin normally? Could be fine if their plan is another Curiosity, because then I would have a 5/5 blocker for it. If they have another Phantom Interference, which I kind of suspect, given the earlier play of destroying Baloth, I might be better off holding it. And then Curator's not too far from turning into a huge trampler either. My opponent just uses Fountain Port, so that's fine by me. And with Heirloom, a 1/1 chump blocker is not super relevant. So their hand might be Interference, not sure what else. They start getting in with the flyers. Do we see a Kaito? We do not. And opponent's gonna shuffle away the Scrap Shooter with a Drowner, makes sense. Alright, Curator can start snacking. Alright, Tidebinder's gonna counter the ability. Do I wanna respond by exiling anything else? I mean, I wouldn't be able to grow it into a 7/7 anymore until we deal with the Tidebinder. I don't think they have a way of necessarily bringing back the Enduring Curiosity, so then it might be best to leave it in the graveyard for future Curators. But I'm probably fine exiling like a Bitter Triumph. So now it's just a normal 3/3. Surrak still decent. So if I flip this face up for 5, I'm still going to be a little short of casting Surrak. But what I can do is flip it face up and then draw a million cards with Heirlooms, which seems fine. And leave Curator back. Don't really want to trade it for Tidebinder. Could have also main phased this to play an extra land to grow it a little bit more. Opponent falls to 3. Alright, that's fine. Drawing one fewer card and being able to maybe play another Bloomkin was also an option, although we do still maybe suspect an extra Interference in hand. So then I would have had to cast Bloomkin and then turn this face up, but then I would not have been able to draw. Alright, opponent maybe top decked a Bitter Triumph there. So that sets us back and also punishes me for not committing an extra Bloomkin, although with Surrak we can always give it haste. So we might be fine here. Play Bloomkin, play Surrak, Bloomkin has haste, and give it trample. Can we make that happen? we can. And there's not a whole lot our opponent can do about it. So yeah, that's where Surrak is better than the Axebane Ferox, which only can give itself haste. Surrak helps the team out. And yeah, let's go to attackers. Could have also played an extra Baloth, I suppose. But it shouldn't matter, even if they draw with Fountain Ports, they seem pretty dead, and their opponent scoops it up. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the play with a keepable hand. Probably keeping Bushwhack as a fight spell. Even though we have the Bloomkin, which is hungry for forests. But fighting with a 3/3, or maybe a bigger creature, could help clear a path. Our opponent with a red-green, tapped Stomping Ground. So get in for 3 with a Baloth. Next turn we can double spell Heirloom into another 2-drop. And if they're on some sort of Delirium deck, we have Graveyard Hate. And yeah, we see Esper Origins. Could also be kind of a Naya Yuna deck, trying to get back enchantments from the graveyard. Either way, Curator exiling Origins before they can flash it back is relevant. And they seem to be on a Teamer deck, so I think this is the Teamer Battle Crier combo deck that they want to pair with the Trailblazer to kind of go off. So then the graveyard doesn't matter as much. So go Heirloom into Bloomkin. Bushwhack as removal is going to be important to clear the aforementioned Battle Crier. And next turn Bloomkin could be a 4/4 attacking. Currently Bushwhack would still trade for Battle Crier, so getting this up to a 5/5 would be ideal. Opponent goes for World Wagon first, so now our best stop deck is the Scrap Shooter to destroy the artifact. Surrak isn't bad either. So, got a few options. Can draw with Heirloom, can go Surrak plus Curator, just dump all my creatures into play. Could also Curator exile Esper Origins before they can flash it back. And then still draw with Heirloom. I'm getting in for 7, opponent falls to 9. Them having a 4/4 on defense and gaining more life is relevant. So I don't actually hate the Curator plan. So then we can attack and draw. And then having a forest for next turn is useful. So exile this now. And pass a turn. Alright, there's a Battle Crier, so we could just be dead here. That's where not having instant speed removal is relevant. Crew World Wagon with Battle Crier, so now they control 2 4-powered creatures, get a 2-mana discount. So they can start casting a bunch of spells. A Roaming Throne's a good one. Name's Dragon, so they must have Dragonhawk in hand already. World Wagon attacks. So they are leaving themselves pretty vulnerable, as we can just go land, Bushwhack, Roaming Throne with Bloomkin and attack for lethal. And then exiling Roaming Throne with Curator adds creature and artifact, so it would turn into a 7/7 Trampler as well. So yeah, showing the importance of the Bloomkin. Make sure we select the right mode. Pay the ward. And our opponent knows what's happening, but yeah, we would be attacking for 12, 13, 14, 15 at least. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a fine hand. Turn 1 Elves. Couple options on 2. Might want a Bushwhack for a forest, which also empowers the Bloomkin. Could even disguise the Bloomkin, although that's usually more of a late game play. Up against a red deck, mono-red aggro it seems. So don't really want to expose Bloomkin to a cheap burn spell when it can get larger later. Curator is a fine play, could bushwhack the Hired Claw. Although, I'm kind of thinking I need to bushwhack for land here, since we're going to need the extra mana. And again, it also makes the Bloomkin better. But I do kind of expect him to burn the Curator and then hit us for 2 with a Hired Claw. Otherwise, Curator's happy to block. And yeah, there's a Lightning Strike. So that was expected. Can follow up with a Ferox. Surrak now also decent. Although Ferox they cannot target at the moment. So I kind of like that idea. And then Curator can also keep graveyards clear for the Axebane Ferox. Maybe I draw land and I get to double spell. Do still have to watch out for a Screaming Nemesis, which can be very good against large green creatures. Opponent with a Sarkhan, so they are on the dragon build, but no dragons in hand. So we can hit for 4 again, followed up with Surrak, or I can go Curator plus Bloomkin. Kinda like Surrak. So then the elf isn't doing anything. But it does mean that if they want to remove Surrak to keep attacking, we'll at least draw a card. And with another Surrak in hand, we don't really mind. Now the elves at least seems to be safe from the Hellkite, since they didn't reveal it to Sarkhan. Otherwise that can be a clean answer to our 1-1. Opponent's having to use a Braid. We take 4 damage. And still no additional lands. I'm glad I bushwhacked for a forest, although then again Hired Claw has also been dealing some damage. So what's next? Maybe just double Curator. Those are some pretty good blockers on this board. Ferox, they can now pay the Collect Evidence, so that's a reason to start exiling stuff from graveyard. But we're not going to be close yet to a 7/7 Curator, since we're missing an extra type, only have Sorcery, Creature, and Instant. So I think just making a pair of 3/3s is fine. It's usually a solid strategy against monored aggro. So they do now have 3 mana, could see Screaming Nemesis, yep. But they have to hang back. Okay, so we can keep developing our board. If the Ferox attacks, even if they block with Nemesis, sure they can redirect 4 damage, but that's not the end of the world. And if I play Surrak first, then we also get to draw cards. So I think this is a reasonable attack. And then maybe play the Bloomkin second main. Double block there makes sense. Hired Claw might actually be scarier than Sarkhan, since they could have another one in hand. And then, again, we're not gonna pump the Curators just yet. So yeah, I'll let damage happen. They can redirect 4. And Surrak will draw. Okay. So what's their best case scenario? Have another Screaming Nemesis. But even then, they're kind of on the back foot. Alright. So we don't just win the game here. Although land does make Bloomkin lethal by itself. So they have to block it. If the elves also attacks, then they have to chump the Ferox. So then Nemesis on Bloomkin, Surrak on Ferox take 4 down to 1. They get to redirect 5 damage, which can just finish off the Bloomkin probably. Yeah, that seems reasonable. And And then I could exile one thing with the Curator here and still empty my hand. But yeah, I doubt they're actually targeting the Ferox over the Bloomkin here. Alright, they're still gonna collect evidence. So could have prevented that by exiling more things beforehand, but we want to just play more creatures out and don't really see them recovering from it. Even a Lenor Elves is lethal. And that'll do it. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a keepable hand. Looks to be a bushwhack, get a forest situation. And then turn to Baloth, most likely. Facing black-white. Can be a color pair that has a couple enchantments Scrap Shooter can destroy. But it's also a color pair with a lot of creature removal. Alright, this might be the 4-color control deck. So expecting a Get Lost or a Lightning Helix, even worse. Well, they do not have any artifacts or enchantments worth destroying, so we may as well just play this now. And at 4 toughness, at least it survives another Lightning Helix. But they do also have a Get Lost, as we mentioned. Alright, so they could still have the counterspell up is a problem. No more lies. So I don't know if I want to necessarily slam down Surrak. Could go Heirloom into Scrap Shooter if Heirloom resolves. They might counter the Heirloom because they don't want me drawing cards. That resolves. So then let's start by attacking. That works. Should have maybe gone for the extra card if they are indeed keeping up a counterspell. But it feels like they would have countered. So we control double Scrap Shooter. At 5 mana they do have Ultima to destroy creatures and artifacts. So that's going to be difficult to recover from if we don't have more haste creatures to follow up. Alright, Ferox is a haste creature, so right now, if I go for Surrak, I can still draw a card and smack them for 13, so then Ferox would be lethal. Okay. So Formidable is enabled, get to attack. Could have maybe cast Bushwhack to get a forest first, but shouldn't matter. And yeah, opponent did indeed have Ultima, but luckily we have the perfect follow-up. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. We do not have a 1-drop, but yeah, Curator into Surrak. Hopefully into more 4-drops is still reasonable. Opponent is going to miss with their duress, so that feels nice. Although mono black is probably going to have access to a good chunk of removal, so it's going to be tricky to keep our creatures around. At least Surrak can maybe draw some cards in return. And the haste also helps. Alright, it is black-white after all, although that does mean they could already have a 4-mana Day of Judgment to wipe the board, as opposed to needing 5 mana for a cover-up. Now Strategic Betrayal. If they have another one, that's a clean answer to Surrak. So we haven't gotten an attack in yet. At least with Shoot the Sheriff we draw. Curator can also clean the graveyards, which is a nice combo with the Ferox, so they have a harder time collecting evidence. But this turn's a little awkward, because if I go for Ferox, they can pay the collect evidence. Although they're also somewhat likely to just want to draw with a Tome. So I could go Curator, gobble up their graveyard, or I could go for another Surrak. I guess Surrak is maybe still better. Their opponent just drawing with a Tome. That's their last card. Opponent gains 4. And Catramos makes sense. So now we have to be careful. Whenever one or more cards are put into exile from graveyards, during their turn they draw a card. But now if we exile more stuff with a Curator, our opponent could also benefit from it. And the collect evidence on Ferox actually enables Catramos to an extent. Well, the best I can do is just smash. Player Author Surrak. Formidable is enabled. Can attack for 9. And hope they don't have more removal. Primal Might's not going to work on an indestructible creature. And Ghost Vacuum can also enable Catramos. So they draw. At least it does cost 1 life. And Feed the Cycle. Takes out Surrak, exiling a bunch more cards from graveyard. So currently 6 for Catramos. So they need 1 more in exile. Seam Rip does not quite do it. And our opponent explodes. Yeah, they're just dead on board here. Can play the Ferox, attack for 9. Although we also had some interesting plays available now with a Scrap Shooter, which could have also maybe blown up a Ghost Vacuum, so they can't keep exiling stuff as easily. And Primal Might could also be used as a pump spell, although if we play Ferox it would only be +1 power. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. Hand seems fine. Turn 1 Elves, turn 2 could go Heirloom plus Baloth. Up against the red deck, so Elves no more, but at least it soaked up a burn spell, which also could have taken out the Baloth, which now seems to be the play. Now Hardclaw and Lava Runner. So we have options. I could play Bloomkin, use Bloomkin to fight, so Baloth doesn't trade, because if I Bushwhack with a Baloth, they can block and still take the trade. So that looks good. And then Hardclaw is usually scarier. Keep up the pressure. Scrap Shooter can also help if they're on the Slick Shots, and our opponent's just gonna scoop it up. So yeah, monogreen aggro beats mono-red. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We have a fine hand. Elves into Surrak. Bushwhack can either get a land or fight. So we've got a few removal spells at least. Now the drawback of this build is that our removal is sorcery speed only, so that can sometimes be a pretty big drawback in certain matchups. Thinking of any decks running auras like Sheltered by Ghosts, which you ideally want to respond with at instant speed. But for now we get to curve out. So if I don't draw land, I'm tempted to just Bushwhack, get a forest, and then we can still Scrap Shooter. Now there's no real need. So I guess I can cast a Scrap Shooter, see if it resolves. Opponent's gonna exhale, which draws with Surrak. And now Baloth can make future spells uncounterable. So I kinda like Bushwhack, get a land, so next turn I'm guaranteed to double spell Baloth with scrap shooter. So yeah, turn to Surrak, putting in work. So your opponent is on a dragon ramp deck. Not sure if it's just blue-green or maybe Teamer splashing red. Seems to be just blue-green. Alright, we're gonna keep up the pressure, and then I don't mind Scrap Shooter blowing up the World Wagon here. Gifting a card doesn't feel great, but we're kind of taking the tempo advantage. Cards in hand don't matter if you're dead. And then Primal Might is a perfect way to clear a path while dealing additional damage. Lanner Elves, and our opponent concedes, so yeah, that was a nice, quick, efficient win. Alright, so we get to see this monogreen stompy deck in action, and yeah, the deck's definitely capable of some powerful starts, especially with Lanner Elves and Heirloom ramping things out, and then Heirloom also does a good job of providing a bit of card advantage and the much needed trample to grant to our Bloomkins. So overall, quite happy with where the deck ended up. We've got a good mix of interaction with our fight spells, although the deck of course does have some weaknesses. Being an all-creature deck means that control decks with lots of removal can take over. We can be weak to aura strategies, since once the opponent builds up a huge creature and we can no longer successfully fight it, then that plan also falls apart. So there are definitely some angles of attack that can easily beat this monogreen strategy, but for the current meta, where you've got a lot of red aggro burn decks and maybe some graveyard combo decks, you've got some much needed tools to win those matchups. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.